Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back. So today I was requested to do a video from another user on YouTube about properly oiling a Crosman 2240. So that's what we're going to do for you today. Now I have two different oils that I like to use, one of which of course Crosman pellet gun oil. The other one is SAE 30 non-detergent motor oil. Now I've been using the motor oil stuff for years and I love it because my seals are lasting much longer than they do with the Crosman pellet gun oil. Don't know why, just is. So I kind of stick with that stuff for the majority. Alright, so for this video we're going to show you with the proper oil, but just know you can use the other stuff too. So make sure that you got no CO2 gas in your gun. First thing you're going to do is cock your gun. Get your pellet gun oil out. Now you've got an O-ring on your probe here. That needs to be oiled. So just rub a little bit of oil down on there, a couple drops worth. You know, 2, not like 3 or 4 or a dozen, but just, 2 drops is more than sufficient. Close the bolt up and then put a little bit of oil on top of the bolt, just a little bit so you can actually see there's some there, and then just run it back and forth with the gun cocked. And then pull your bolt all the way back. You'll hear the click. Alright, pull your trigger, gently release, decock your gun. The O-ring should be done probably every couple of 100 shots. Okay, I mean you don't really have to, count every single shot and then re-lube, but every couple of 100 shots. So every, say, I don't know, half a tin of pellets or a full tin of pellets, depending on the size of your tin. If you're using a 250 tin, shoot the whole darn tin. If you're using a 500 tin, shoot the majority of it, and you're fine. But or you could practice every time you're done shooting your gun. You could actually put one drop of oil on that O-ring. If you know the gun's going to be stored for a long time, that's the key thing. So if you're done shooting for the day and say for sure it's going to be, say, a couple of weeks before you're going to shoot again, then I would say right after you're done shooting, put a couple drops. Otherwise, if you're going to shoot again tomorrow or a couple days from now, don't worry about it. So I'd say every 250 to say 300 shots, maybe put a drop or 2 of oil on that O-ring. Okay, same with your probe, especially the probe if you have a steel breech, because that's a lot of metal to metal friction there. So you want to keep that area as lubricated as often as you would the O-ring. Okay, so it's not a critical thing, but you should keep that lubricated too. Now, if you have a Williams notch sight, or in the case of this rear sight, this is an LPA sight. These are micro adjustable clickable sights. They very good for precision targeting purposes for shooting. You would want to make sure all the lubrication points are done. Now, a lubrication point is called pretty much any moving point, right? So in this case, we're going to run it along the sides, along the front where the hinge is, on the screw, on this back screw here, and there's edgings between here too. And just run a few drops there. It's going to look a little messy at first, but just let the gun sit for a minute and let that oil seep in. Then when you're done letting that sit in, just give it a little bit of a wipe down just to get the excess off of there. Okay, now the rear sight, you should lubricate it probably every couple of months anyways. It's not something that has to be done all the time. That oil is going to stay there for a long time because it's not like CO2 gas is shooting through there, right? So every couple of months lubricate that. You can lubricate it more often, because you're not going to hurt anything, right? You're not going to over oil it. All right. Now, next thing you're going to do is you're going to put your CO2 bottle in. So put a fresh bottle of gas in your gun and put enough drops on there, usually 3-4 drops worth, till you get a nice little bubble, okay, of oil showing up. Turn your gun this way and then gently bring that up. Hold your finger in there to hold it up against the end seal, and then just like that. Now let your gun sit for a few seconds in a vertical position like that, so that the oil can make its way through the valve. It's already touched the end seal, that's already lubed instantly. Let that oil drip its way in through your valve, because when you ignite the bottle of gas, everything's going to pressurize inside, and it's going to spray that oil through the entire insides of the valve, and it's going to lubricate the spring, the stem. It's going to get some on the outside of the stem seal, and after a couple of shots, and as the oil works its way through, it's actually going to lubricate that stem seal completely for you. It's going to push oil up through the transfer port or exhaust port in through the transfer port area. There's actually a little gasket in here between the transfer port and the exhaust valve. The pressure coming from the CO2 gas shooting up through the bottom of that valve is actually going to get lubrication in that gasket, and it's going to keep that gasket pliable and pretty airtight sealed for a long time. And at the same time, you've already got a couple of drops of oil on your probe. That oil with the oil that's going to come through that valve as things get lubricated is going to lubricate the inside of your barrel too, which is all bonus, right? So we're done letting this sit. So take your cap, your screw-on cap, and you're going to screw it in just a couple of threads worth. And then take your pellet gun oil, put your gun on its side like this, and just run a bit of oil back and forth along the threads. Just on the top side is more than sufficient, because as you screw this in, of course it's rotating, it's going to lubricate all that threaded area. And it's very important to make sure that that is lubricated, especially steel to steel contact, aluminum to steel, brass to steel, depending on what kind of end cap you have on here. Now what you do is you screw this in until it stops just on its own, and then just snug it up a little bit, okay, just enough to say that it's hand tightened. Don't reef the hell out of it. You don't need to. A lot of people make that mistake, and then they start ripping out their end seals like crazy, and they develop leaks in there more often than the rest of us do because they're over tightening. Okay, there's no need to over tighten this. This is not a valve piercing valve. It is a hammer piercing valve. So what that means is you've got a pin, a sharp pin on the end of the valve stem. So as soon as you fire the gun, that pin slams forward, hits the tip of the bottle, and opens up the bottle, lets the gas flow, and so you don't need to reef that down. Now, if you haven't tightened up enough, of course, you might hear a bit of a hiss going on. Give it a little crank, and you'll stop. You should stop hearing it unless you've got a problem with your end seal. I've yet myself to blow an end seal on a 2240, and I've owned these guns for years. Okay. So if you properly lubricate and maintain things, that end seal should last you for several years, okay, before you'll need to ever replace it. And so anyways, so you've also got, if you have a factory rear sight, no lubrication needed there. Factory breech, you really don't need to lubricate between the probe and the breech, but in my case, steel breech, brass probe, steel breech, steel probe. Okay, you need to lubricate the top of that probe area, so you can just run a bit of oil on there and you're good. LPA rear sights, Williams notch sights are the most two common ones used on these breeches. Every moving part on your sight, run some oil on, let it sit. Okay, I'm just redoing things here for you. Your safety, okay, your safety. Put the gun on safe, and this is because this is where all the cutouts are the most of on your safety pin, and run the safety back and forth. And as you do that, just the pressure from that and the detent ball hitting it, it's going to actually spray oil up into that ball, and it's going to rotate the ball as it's going back and forth, and it'll pop some oil up into the spring too, because there's a little detent spring there too. And just back and forth and back and forth. Do that a few times, maybe a dozen, and that'll really super lube that area up. Okay. Do you need to lube your trigger? Technically, no, you don't. But if you really must lubricate every single moving part, then yeah, you can lubricate your trigger. Hold your gun in this sort of a way. Run some oil here on either side. Okay, a few drops worth on either side. That'll soak in real fast in there. And that'll actually get some oil in near to your sear as well. and it'll eventually drip itself down to the spring for your trigger spring or sear spring. Now, before storage, always wipe your gun down with some pellet gun oil. I don't recommend using any kind of firearm oil because this stuff actually can eat seals, and it only takes a drop and it can start eating seals. So don't ever use firearm oil near a pellet gun. And a lot of people say, well, a pellet gun is a firearm. Technically, yes, but it's not shooting bullets. It's shooting pellets, and it's using air for propellant, not gunpowder. Way different, okay? So take some oil, put several drops worth on a paper towel, and wipe down your entire gun. Now you should do the wipe down personally all the time, but you know, before you put it away. But you know, it depends on how often you're shooting your gun and the way you store your gun. If you store it open into the elements, you're going to have to wipe it down more often with some oil. But especially if you're going to store it for a long time, you might want to oil it more often on the outsides. Now, I don't have a barrel band here because I'm free floating my barrel. So in that case, I fold the paper towel and I just jam it up between the barrel and the tubing. So you got to watch how thick you actually do this. And you can get some of that pellet gun oil or 30 weight non-detergent motor oil in between your barrel, underneath and the top side of your tube in there. Wipe her down really good. Don't worry about getting oil on the paint job on the grip. It is actually good for it. It's not going to hurt it. If you have any metal mod parts, make sure you lubricate, you know, wipe some oil on those so they get a little lubrication on them and helps protect them and keep the finish good. And you know, your gun's always going to look pretty much brand new all the time if you keep doing it that way, and you'll have very little chance of any kind of rust buildup. So that's your basics. That's how you oil your gun, maintain the outside finish. If you have any other questions, you know, feel free to ask, and I'll do the best I can to answer them for you. And but until then, we'll see you on the next one, and happy shooting, guys.